They told her love was forbidden. They told him their skin colors could never mix. But what they didn't know was that love does not ask for permission. Love does not bend to hate. Love defies racism. Arif sat at the station, his eyes fixed on an old photograph that had been folded and unfolded too many times. His fingers trembled as he held it close, as though the picture was the only bridge to the memories he was afraid to lose. On that small piece of paper was the face that had changed his entire life, the smile that had taught him that the world could be cruel yet still worth fighting for. Her name was Emily, and she was the reason he was still breathing hope into the universe. Years ago, Arif had come to the United States on a scholarship. A boy with a suitcase, a stack of books, and dreams larger than the plane that carried him. He had grown up in a modest home, where his mother used to whisper to him every night, "Write the world as you see it, and maybe one day the world will see you." He carried those words like a shield, because in a foreign land, everything felt uncertain. That it was in a quiet library where it all began. He had gone there for solitude, searching for poetry to keep his mind anchored during the loneliness of his first semester. Emily was already there, wandering through shelves with a notebook under her arm, her blonde hair falling gently over her face. Their hands collided when both reached for the same worn-out book of classic poetry. The laughter that followed was soft, hesitant, but strangely familiar, like two songs blending into one. That what started with a polite apology grew into conversations that stretched far beyond the walls of that library. They debated over favorite authors, exchanged interpretations of verses, and often lost track of time. Emily, unlike anyone Arif had met, didn't just listen to his words, she absorbed them. She asked about his culture, his upbringing, the festivals he had celebrated back home. To her, he wasn't just another student with an accent, he was a storyteller whose roots fascinated her. Emily herself had secrets too. Though she came from wealth, she didn't carry arrogance. She carried longing. Her family, bound by rigid traditions, valued appearances over dreams. She confessed to Arif one evening that she wanted to be more than the image her parents crafted for her. She wanted to paint freely, to write poetry without judgment, to love without permission. Arif listened, and for the first time, she felt heard. Weeks turned into months, and their meetings became routine. Parks, quiet cafes, hidden corners of the library, they created their own world, one where colors blended and voices of judgment could not reach. Emily showed him her paintings, vivid strokes of color, raw emotions splashed across canvas. Arif read to her his poetry, words carved from the ache of displacement and the beauty of belonging. Together, they stitched fragments of art and dreams into something neither could ignore, but the world outside their bubble was not as kind. The first cracks appeared during one of Emily's art gatherings at the university. Arif noticed whispers, side glances, judgment thinly veiled as curiosity. One of Emily's so-called friends smirked and asked her loudly, "So, is this a phase, or are you seriously into him?" The word "him" was heavy, dripping with disdain. Emily brushed it off with a laugh, but Arif felt the sting. That night, he told himself to be strong, because Emily's smile was worth more than their cruelty. Still, those whispers began to grow louder. Emily's parents noticed her spending more time away from home, mentioning Arif's name too often. Her mother warned her gently, cloaking prejudice in polite words, "Darling, you must be careful. People will talk. You're from different worlds." But her father was not gentle. "Our blood does not mix with theirs," he declared when he overheard Emily mention Arif. "Do not dishonor this family." Emily's heart cracked under the weight of those words. That night, she cried into her pillow, torn between loyalty and the unshakable feeling that love had already chosen its path. She wanted to protect Arif from the storm that was forming around them, but every time she saw him, every time she heard him speak about his dreams, she knew she couldn't walk away. One evening, Emily invited Arif to an art exhibition. The gallery was buzzing with chatter, but Arif stood frozen in front of one particular painting. Two hands, one brown and one white, reaching for each other but separated by shadows. His chest tightened, his throat burned, and when he looked at Emily across the room, he understood. That was her way of telling him what words could not. After the show, they walked beneath the stars, the night air thick with unspoken confessions. Emily finally turned to him, her voice trembling yet firm. "I don't care about the world's labels. To me, you're home." Arif couldn't stop his tears. He whispered back, "And you are the poem I never thought I'd write." Their lips met, sealing a truth they could no longer deny, but happiness, when it defies society, often comes at a cost. Days later, Emily's father discovered the depth of their relationship. He confronted her with fury. "You will not see him again. Do you understand me? Our family name will not be stained by this mistake." Emily shouted back through tears, "Love is not a stain. Hate is." Her father's face hardened. "If you continue this foolishness, you will lose everything." Meanwhile, Arif found himself isolated. In classrooms, professors overlooked his answers. Students whispered behind his back. At the cafeteria, a cruel voice muttered, "She's too good for him." He clenched his fists but stayed silent. He couldn't fight every battle. He couldn't prove his worth to those who had already decided he had none. His only refuge was Emily, but now she too was under siege. They met in secret, their stolen hours filled with laughter and tears. Emily would rest her head on his shoulder, whispering, "Promise me we'll survive this." Arif would hold her tighter, answering, "Even if the world turns against us, I'll stand with you." But the weight grew heavier each day. Emily could feel her father's anger boiling. Arif could feel his dreams slipping away as discrimination cornered him. Both carried wounds they never asked for. Still, when they looked into each other's eyes, they saw strength. One night, after another brutal argument with her father, Emily came to Arif, her face pale, her eyes swollen from crying. "He wants me to choose," she whispered. Arif felt his chest tighten, fear and guilt crashing together. He stayed silent, but inside his mind a war raged. Was he selfish for holding on to her? Was he ruining her future by asking her to stay? That night, after Emily left, Arif sat by his desk, opened his diary, and poured his soul into words. He wrote about love that refused to kneel, about hearts that beat louder than prejudice, about the fire of two souls daring to unite. But when the ink dried, he also wrote a line that shook him to his core: "If love is wrong because of my skin, then I choose to be wrong forever." As he closed the diary, his hands trembled, and a single tear fell onto the page. Somewhere deep down, he knew the battle was only beginning, and the path ahead would demand more courage than either of them had ever imagined. And as the train at the station screeched in the distance, the photograph in his hand seemed to whisper her name, reminding him that love, no matter how forbidden, was the only truth he had left. Emily's father thought threats would be enough to break her, but he didn't understand the quiet storm inside her heart. Every cruel word only made her cling tighter to the truth she had already chosen. She loved Arif, not because it was easy, not because it was safe, but because it was real. Real love does not bend to fear. Real love does not hide forever. The nights became their sanctuary. They would meet in small cafes that stayed open until dawn, or by the lake where the water reflected their silent vows. Emily sketched their moments together, Arif reading poetry, his eyes glowing with passion, or their hands intertwined like they had been designed to fit. Arif, in return, filled his diary with verses that painted Emily as the light breaking through endless darkness. They didn't need the world's approval. They only needed each other's presence, but the world kept intruding. At university, a professor humiliated Arav in front of the class, questioning whether someone like him could ever understand Western literature. The sting of those words burned deep, but Arav stayed silent, refusing to let anger break him in public. Later, when Emily heard, she cried and said, "You don't deserve this." Arav only smiled faintly and answered, "I don't deserve you, and yet here you are. That is enough." Her father's pressure grew merciless. One evening, he slammed the door to her room and declared he would cut her off completely if she didn't end it. No inheritance, no family support, no comfort of their home. Just exile. Emily looked at him with tears brimming in her eyes and said quietly, "If love costs me everything, then I will pay the price." Her father's face hardened, but behind his anger was fear, the fear that his daughter was slipping away from the cage he had built. Arav saw how much it was destroying her. The guilt gnawed at him. He lay awake night after night, torn apart by the thought that maybe walking away was the only way to protect her. He wrote her a letter, every word dripping with heartbreak. "If my presence brings you pain, I will vanish. I would rather live with emptiness than see you suffer because of me." With shaking hands, he folded the letter and left it where she would find it. When Emily read it, her world collapsed. She rushed through the city like a storm, searching every corner, every place he might be, until she found him at the train station. His suitcase was by his side, his eyes heavy with resignation. She ran to him, grabbed his arm, and with a voice trembling but unbreakable, she cried, "If you leave, they win. If you stay, we fight together. Don't you dare take my choice away from me." Arav's heart broke all over again, but this time not from despair, this time from the weight of her love. He dropped the suitcase. The station around them disappeared in that moment, leaving only the two of them, two souls standing against an entire world. He whispered, "Then together we stand." And she whispered back, "Together we rise." From that day, Emily made her choice final. She left her parents' house, carrying only her art supplies and her courage. Arav took on part-time jobs, waiting tables, tutoring, anything to make ends meet, while still chasing the dream of his words reaching the world. Their apartment was small, but their hearts overflowed with richness. They decorated the walls with Emily's paintings, scattered Arav's poems across the floor, and laughed at how happiness could grow even in the cracks of struggle. One evening, Arav handed her a copy of his first published poetry collection. On the dedication page were the words, "To the girl who taught me that love has no color." Emily wept as she held it close, knowing their fight had already begun to ripple outward. Soon after, her paintings started to gain attention. Critics praised her boldness, her refusal to paint comfort when the truth demanded courage. Canvases of entwined hands, faces of blended heritage, shadows dissolving into light, her art became a voice for every heart that had ever been silenced, but with recognition came confrontation. At one exhibition, as applause filled the gallery, her father appeared. His face was stern, his eyes burning with a final attempt to reclaim control. In front of everyone, he demanded, "Come back to your real family. This is not who you are. You are embarrassing us." The room fell silent, every eye fixed on Emily. She took a deep breath, her voice steady as steel. "Family doesn't build walls. Family builds bridges. If you cannot accept love, then you cannot accept me." Her words echoed through the gallery, followed by a wave of applause. Some clapped because of her courage, others because they knew history was being made before their eyes. Her father's face crumbled with the weight of a truth he could no longer deny. He walked out, his pride in ruins, leaving behind a daughter he no longer controlled. For Emily and Arav, that moment was not just a victory, it was liberation. They knew battles remained ahead, but they also knew love had already won. Together, they continued creating, turning pain into art, prejudice into poetry, rejection into resilience. Arif's second book climbed into hands across the country. Emily's paintings traveled from one gallery to another, carrying messages louder than protests. Their love was no longer just theirs, it had become a symbol for everyone yearning to break free from chains of hate. Years passed, and one morning, a letter arrived for Emily. It was from her father. The handwriting was shaky, the words uneven, but they carried something unexpected. I don't know how to erase the years I spent blind. I don't know if forgiveness is mine to ask. But I want you to know, I am sorry. Perhaps love is stronger than pride. Perhaps I was wrong. Emily read it silently, tears slipping down her cheeks. She didn't know if reconciliation was possible, but she knew seeds of change had been planted, and that was enough for now. Arif held her hand as she folded the letter and whispered, "Even the hardest hearts can soften when faced with truth." She smiled faintly and answered, "We never fought to change him. We fought to stay true to us." And in the end, that was enough. Their story did not end in fairy tale perfection. Life was still hard. There were still whispers, still stares, still moments when the world reminded them of the lines it had drawn. But they no longer bowed to those lines. They walked past them, hand in hand, proving that love, once chosen, is unstoppable. And so, we return to the station where Arif once almost left. But this time, he wasn't alone. Emily was by his side, their fingers entwined, their eyes carrying years of battles and victories. Arif opened his diary one last time, wrote a final line, and closed it gently. He looked at Emily, smiled, and whispered, "Love does not ask for permission. Love defies racism." The train roared in the background, but neither of them moved. They didn't need to run anymore. They had already arrived at the only destination that mattered, each other.